On my birthday, my rich grandson smiled. "How do you spend your $3.4 million trust fund, Grandma?" I blinked in shock. "What trust fund?" My daughter-in-law looked like she might throw up. He turned to her and asked, "Where did it go?" If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Now, let me tell you how I went from birthday cake to financial crime in less than 5 minutes. I'm Dorothy Hartwell, 73 years old, and until last Tuesday, I thought my biggest problem was deciding whether to splurge on cable television. Turns out, I should have been worried about where my millions went instead. But let me back up. It all started at what was supposed to be a quiet family dinner for my birthday at my son Michael's house in Westchester. Nothing fancy, just me, Michael, his wife Patricia, and their 18-year-old son Connor. The kind of family gathering where I usually got a grocery store cake and everyone checked their phones more than they looked at me. Connor had just gotten back from his first semester at Princeton. All confidence and expensive clothes I knew Michael couldn't afford on his teaching salary. The boy had always been sharp, but college seemed to have given him a new kind of awareness about money. Maybe too much awareness. We were sitting around their dining room table, the one Patricia had insisted they buy on credit 3 years ago because presentation matters, Dorothy. I was cutting my slice of supermarket cake when Connor, bless his heart, decided to make conversation. "So, Grandma," he said, leaning back in his chair with that casual confidence only teenagers possess. "I've been taking this economics course, and we're learning about wealth management. I was curious, how do you spend your $3.4 million trust fund? Like, do you have a financial advisor, or do you just keep it in savings?" The fork stopped halfway to my mouth. "I'm sorry, what now?" Patricia, who had been reaching for the coffee pot, froze completely. The color drained from her face so fast, I thought she might faint right into the birthday cake. "Your trust fund," Connor repeated, looking confused by my confusion. "The one Dad set up for you after Grandpa died, the one that pays for your apartment and everything." I set down my fork very carefully. In my 73 years, I've learned that life has a way of dropping bombshells when you least expect them, but this was something else entirely. "Connor, honey," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I don't have a trust fund. I live on Social Security and the small pension from the hospital where I worked for 30 years. That's it." Michael had gone very quiet, staring at his plate like it contained the secrets of the universe. Patricia looked like she was considering whether jumping out the window might be preferable to whatever was about to happen. Connor's eyebrows shot up. "But Dad, you told me last year when I was applying for financial aid that Grandma was well taken care of. You said there was a trust fund that covered all her expenses, which is why I could put down that we don't provide any financial support for grandparents on the FAFSA forms." "Oh, now this was getting interesting." "Connor," Patricia said sharply, "maybe we should discuss this later." "No," I said, my voice carrying the authority I'd used as head nurse for 15 years. "I think we should discuss this right now. Connor, tell me exactly what your father told you about this supposed trust fund." The poor boy looked between his parents, clearly sensing the tension, but not understanding its source. "He said Grandpa left you really well provided for when he died, that there was a trust fund worth over $3 million that pays for your apartment, your medical expenses, everything. He said you were independent and didn't need any help from us." $3 million. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. My husband, Frank, had been a good man and a decent electrician, but he died 12 years ago with about $80,000 in savings and a paid-off house that we'd sold to cover his medical bills. The idea that he'd hidden millions from me was ridiculous, but the look on Patricia's face wasn't ridiculous. It was pure, undiluted panic. "Patricia," I said quietly, "you look like you've seen a ghost. Something you want to share with the class?" She started stammering something about misunderstandings and confusion, but Connor interrupted her. "Wait," he said, his economics training clearly kicking in. "If Grandma doesn't know about the trust fund and she's not getting money from it, then where is the money going?" Smart boy. Takes after his grandmother, not his father. Michael finally looked up from his plate. "Mom, I think there's been some confusion. The only confusion here," I said, standing up from the table, "is how my son convinced his child that his grandmother has millions of dollars she doesn't know about. Connor, sweetheart, would you mind showing me exactly what your father told you about this trust fund? Because I have a feeling." That's when Patricia started crying. Not pretty tears, but the ugly, gasping kind that happens when someone's world is about to collapse. And I realized my quiet little birthday dinner had just become something much more interesting. Patricia's tears weren't the delicate kind women cry in movies. These were the desperate, hiccuping sobs of someone whose carefully constructed lie was crumbling faster than week-old cookies. "Patricia," I said, settling back into my chair with the patience I'd learned from dealing with difficult patients. "Why don't you tell me what's really going on?" She wiped her nose with her napkin, which struck me as ironic since she'd always insisted on cloth napkins because they were more refined than paper. "Nothing refined about snot, honey. It's not what you think," she began, which in my experience means it's exactly what you think, only worse. Connor looked between his parents like he was watching a tennis match. "Will someone please explain what's happening? Does Grandma have a trust fund or not?" "No," I said firmly. "I absolutely do not have a trust fund, but apparently someone has been telling people I do. Michael, you want to jump in here any time?" My son had the good grace to look ashamed, but he stayed silent. 45 years old, and still letting his wife do the talking when things got uncomfortable. Some things never change. Patricia took a shaky breath. When Connor was applying for colleges 2 years ago, the financial aid forms were so complicated. They wanted to know about all family assets, including grandparents' wealth. Michael thought, "We thought, you thought you'd commit fraud on federal financial aid forms by claiming I had money I don't have?" I kept my voice conversational, but inside I was furious. "That's a felony, Patricia. You could go to prison for that." "We never took any money," she protested. "We just adjusted the numbers so Connor could get better aid packages." I looked at Connor, who had gone pale. "Honey, did you receive need-based financial aid this year?" He nodded mutely. "Based on forms that said your grandmother has over $3 million? Another nod. Well, this was just getting better and better. Not only had they committed financial aid fraud, they'd done it using my name and non-existent assets. "But here's what I don't understand," I continued, channeling the sharp tone I'd used with incompetent residents. "Connor specifically asked how I spend my trust fund money. That's not something you'd ask about financial aid forms. That suggests this conversation has come up before. Multiple times." Patricia's crying intensified. Michael finally found his voice. "Mom, we can explain everything." "Oh, I hope so. Because right now I'm thinking about calling the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. They're very interested in education fraud these days." "You wouldn't," Patricia gasped. "Try me. I'm 73, Patricia. At my age, revenge is basically a hobby." Connor suddenly sat up straighter. "Wait, Dad, remember last Christmas when you said we couldn't visit Grandma more often because she preferred her privacy and independence? And when Aunt Sarah asked why Grandma was living in that small apartment instead of a nice senior community, you said she chose to live modestly despite having plenty of money?" The pieces were clicking together for the boy. I was proud of him for that, and deeply disappointed in his parents. "You've been telling the whole family I'm secretly wealthy," I said. It wasn't a question. "It wasn't supposed to hurt anyone," Michael said weakly. "We just wanted people to stop worrying about you. Stop asking us to help more." "Help more?" I laughed, and it wasn't a nice sound. "Michael, when's the last time you helped me with anything? When did you last visit? Call? Hell, when did you last remember my birthday without Patricia reminding you?" His silence was answer enough. "So let me see if I understand this correctly," I continued, warming to my theme. "You told your son, your relatives, probably your friends and neighbors, that I'm sitting on millions of dollars. You used this fictional fortune to commit financial aid fraud, and you did all of this so people would stop expecting you to act like a decent son to your elderly mother." "Mom, please." "I'm not finished. Connor, when you filled out those college applications, who did you think was paying for your education? The financial aid and, well, I thought you were helping," he said quietly. "Dad always made it sound like you wanted to contribute, but preferred to do it quietly through the trust fund." My heart broke a little for the boy. He genuinely believed his grandmother was supporting his education. Meanwhile, I was clipping grocery store coupons and buying generic medications to make my Social Security check last each month. "Patricia," I said, "stop crying and answer a simple question. If people think I have millions and Connor thinks I'm paying for college, where exactly do they think this money is coming from?" She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "We created some basic documentation, just for Connor's peace of mind. Simple bank statements showing the trust fund activity." "You created fake bank documents in my name?" "Not official ones," Michael protested. "Just informal records. Nothing that would fool a real bank." "Oh, just fake bank documents. Well, that makes identity theft so much better." Connor was staring at his parents, like he'd never seen them before. "You've been lying to me about everything. About Grandma, about college funding, about who we are as a family." Smart boy. He was seeing his parents clearly for the first time, and it wasn't a pretty picture. I stood up again, this time with purpose. Here's what's going to happen. Connor, you're going to call your financial aid office tomorrow and explain that there was an error on your forms. Your grandmother doesn't have a trust fund, never had one, and your family needs to refile everything honestly. But Mom, Michael started. I'm not your mother right now, Michael. Right now, I'm a victim of identity theft and fraud, and you're the perpetrator. Connor, after you call the school, you're going to come stay with me for a few days. We need to have some honest conversations about family and money and integrity. Patricia found her voice. You can't take our son. I'm not taking anything. I'm offering a college student a place to stay while his parents figure out how to dig themselves out of the hole they've created. Connor, you're an adult. It's your choice. The boy looked at his parents, then at me. I'll pack a bag. As Connor headed upstairs, I turned back to Michael and Patricia. Oh, and one more thing. Tomorrow, you're going to call every single person you told about my imaginary fortune and explain that you lied. Your siblings, your neighbors, your friends, everyone. We can't, Patricia whispered. It would ruin us. I smiled, and for the first time in years, it felt genuinely happy. Honey, you ruined yourselves. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it. Connor packed light, just a duffel bag with clothes and his laptop. Smart kid, traveling like he wasn't sure he'd be coming back anytime soon. Can't say I blamed him. My apartment is nothing fancy. 1 bedroom, tiny kitchen, a living room barely big enough for my second-hand couch, and the television I bought on sale 3 years ago. But it's clean, and it's honest, and after tonight, those qualities felt more precious than gold. I'm sorry, Grandma, Connor said as I made up the couch for him. I should have known something was wrong. The numbers never really made sense. What do you mean? He sat down heavily, suddenly looking much older than 18. Well, if you really had over $3 million earning even conservative interest, you'd be getting at least $100,000 a year in income. But you live here, in this apartment, and you shop with coupons, and you wear the same coat you've had for 5 years. I paused in my sheet tucking. You noticed all that? I'm not blind, Grandma. I love my parents, but I'm not stupid. Rich people don't live like you live. But I thought maybe you were just really frugal, or you gave most of it to charity or something. This boy was going to go far in life if he kept thinking critically like that. Connor, can I ask you something? When your parents told you about this trust fund, did they say anything about how it was set up? Who manages it? He pulled out his laptop. Actually, yeah. Dad gave me some documents when I was doing the financial aid paperwork 2 years ago. Said I might need them for verification. He opened a folder on his desktop labeled Financial Aid Docs and turned the screen toward me. What I saw made my blood pressure spike. Basic-looking bank statements from First National Trust Services showing an account in my name with a balance of $3,127,154.32. Monthly statements going back 2 years showing regular withdrawals for living expenses and educational support. Connor, honey, these are fake documents. How can you tell? I pointed to the screen. First, I bank at Westchester Community Bank, have for 20 years. Second, look at this routing number. It's not even a real bank code. And third, see these withdrawal descriptions? Educational support, Princeton University? If I were paying your tuition, sweetheart, Princeton would have my name on file as a source of payment. Have you ever seen any paperwork showing money coming from Dorothy Hartwell? He scrolled through files on his laptop, looking increasingly uncomfortable. No, actually. All my financial aid documents just show federal aid and some scholarship money. Nothing from family. Because your parents never paid a dime of your tuition. The government did, based on fraudulent need calculations. Connor closed the laptop and rubbed his face with both hands. This is bad, isn't it? Like, criminal bad? Very bad. But here's the thing, sweetheart. You're a victim too. You didn't know you were filing false documents. Your parents manipulated you into committing fraud by lying about our family's financial situation. But I should have questioned it more. I should have asked to see real statements or talked to you directly. Smart and responsible. The boy definitely didn't get those traits from his father. Connor, can I see those documents again? I want to look at something. He reopened the laptop. I studied the fake statements more carefully this time, using the reading glasses I kept on a chain around my neck. Something was nagging at me about the details. Look at this, I said, pointing to a line item. August 15th, withdrawal for medical expenses, Mount Sinai Hospital. Connor, I haven't been to Mount Sinai in 10 years, but your mother had her gallbladder surgery there last August. He leaned closer. What are you saying? I'm saying these fake statements aren't just showing random expenses. They're showing real expenses. Your family's real expenses. Someone took the time to create a false narrative where I was secretly paying for things your parents actually paid for themselves. Connor scrolled through more statements. Oh God, look at this one. Home maintenance, $8,500. That's exactly what our roof repair cost last spring. And this one, vehicle maintenance, $2,300. Dad's transmission repair. Your parents haven't just been lying about me having money, Connor. They've been creating a detailed fantasy where I've been supporting your family financially for years. But why? Why go to all this trouble? I had a suspicion, but I needed more information. Connor, besides you, who else has seen these documents? Well, the financial aid office has copies, and Dad showed them to Uncle Robert at Thanksgiving when Uncle Robert was complaining about having to help Aunt Margaret with her mortgage. Uncle Robert, Michael's older brother, the successful one with the accounting firm and the big house in Connecticut, the one who'd always made Michael feel inadequate. What exactly did your father tell Uncle Robert? That you were helping our family financially but preferred privacy about it. Uncle Robert was saying something about how family members should help each other more. And Dad pulled out his phone and showed him one of these statements. Said you'd been quietly taking care of us for years. The picture was becoming clearer, and it wasn't pretty. Michael hadn't just committed fraud for financial aid. He'd used fake documents to boost his standing with his family, to make himself look like the good son with the generous mother instead of the struggling teacher who couldn't provide for his family. Connor, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Has anyone else in the family asked you about my supposed wealth? Cousins? Aunts? Uncles? He was quiet for a long moment. Actually, yeah. Cousin Jessica asked me at Christmas if it was true that you were loaded. Said her mom heard from Uncle Robert that you had been paying for my college and helping with our house payments. And what did you tell her? I said yeah, that you were amazing and generous, but didn't want recognition for it. I said you preferred to help family quietly. My heart sank. The lie had spread through the entire family. By now, every relative probably thought I was sitting on millions while letting my elderly siblings struggle with their own financial problems. Grandma, there's something else, something I probably should have mentioned earlier. I braced myself. What? Yesterday, before the birthday dinner, Dad got a phone call that seemed to upset him. I heard him talking to someone about expectations and timeline and keeping up appearances. He kept saying things like, she doesn't know yet, and we need more time. Did you hear who he was talking to? No, but right before he hung up, he said something about meeting on Tuesday to discuss the situation. Then he saw me listening and went outside to finish the call. Tuesday. That was tomorrow. I had a feeling that whatever meeting Michael had scheduled, it was going to be very enlightening, and I intended to find out exactly what situation required my son to keep lying about my financial status. But first, I had some phone calls to make, starting with my nephew Robert. My nephew, who apparently thought his poor Aunt Dorothy was secretly funding his brother's lifestyle. This was going to be a very interesting conversation. At 8:30 the next morning, I called my nephew Robert's office. As a successful CPA, he was always at his desk early, probably billing some poor client $300 an hour to explain why they couldn't afford nice things. Robert Hartwell CPA Services. This is Robert. Hello, Robert. It's your Aunt Dorothy. Long pause. Then, in a tone you'd use with a beloved but eccentric elderly relative, Aunt Dorothy, what a pleasant surprise. How are you managing everything? Managing everything. Such an interesting choice of words. Oh, I'm managing just fine, Robert. In fact, I'm calling because I understand you've been discussing my financial arrangements with Michael. Another pause, longer this time. Well, yes, we may have touched on that subject. Family looking out for family, you know. Indeed, Robert, I'd like you to explain to me exactly what Michael told you about my financial situation. Aunt Dorothy, surely you don't want to discuss such private matters over the phone. I absolutely do want to discuss them, right now, unless you'd prefer I drove to your office to have this conversation in person? The threat worked. Robert had always been terrified of family drama affecting his professional reputation. Well, Michael mentioned that you've been able to help with some of their expenses. He showed me documentation of a trust fund that your late husband apparently established. Very thoughtfully planned, I must say. Robert, Frank died 12 years ago with $80,000 to his name. He never had enough money to establish a trust fund for anyone. Silence. But Michael showed me bank statements. Michael showed you forgeries. There is no trust fund, Robert. There never was. I live on Social Security and a small pension. That's it. That's impossible. The documents looked completely legitimate, and Michael specifically said you'd been covering Connor's college expenses and helping with their mortgage payments. Now we were getting somewhere. What exactly did he say about helping with their mortgage? That you'd been making monthly contributions to help them afford the house. Said you preferred to handle it directly with them rather than going through banks or formal arrangements. Very generous of you, though I did wonder why you weren't living more comfortably yourself if you had such substantial resources. Smart man. Too bad he'd ignored his instincts. Robert, I have never given Michael a penny toward his mortgage. I've never paid any of Connor's college expenses. And if you took 5 minutes to think about it instead of believing convenient lies, you'd realize that a woman living in a one-bedroom apartment and shopping with grocery store coupons probably isn't secretly millionaire. The phone went very quiet. When Robert spoke again, his voice was tight with professional concern. Aunt Dorothy, if what you're saying is true, then Michael has committed serious fraud. Not just with the family, but potentially with federal financial aid programs. Now you're catching up, but here's what I really want to know. Robert, have you shared this information about my supposed wealth with anyone else in the family? I may have mentioned it to Margaret when she was complaining about her financial struggles, and I think I said something to my mother about how nice it was that you were able to help Michael's family. His mother. Robert's mother was my sister-in-law Helen, Frank's sister, who lived in a senior community in Florida on a fixed income and worried constantly about money. You told Helen that I have millions of dollars? I may have suggested that you were financially comfortable and able to help family members. Robert, Helen called me 2 weeks ago asking if I could loan her $300 for a dental procedure. $300. She was embarrassed to ask, apologized for bothering me, and promised to pay it back in installments. If you'd told her I was wealthy, why would she hesitate to ask for help with a $300 dental bill? The silence stretched so long I thought he might have hung up. Oh God, he finally said. She did ask me about that. She said she was thinking of calling you for help, but wasn't sure it was appropriate. I told her that family helps family, but that she should be careful not to take advantage of your generosity. You essentially told her not to ask me for help because I might get annoyed about the money. I was trying to protect your privacy. You were protecting Michael's lie. And in the process, you let an 80-year-old woman struggle with dental problems because you thought her wealthy sister-in-law might be bothered by a small loan request. I could hear Robert's breathing getting heavier. Aunt Dorothy, I had no idea. The documents looked legitimate, and Michael was so specific about the arrangements. Who else did you tell? Margaret, definitely. Probably my kids at some point. Maybe Janet at the family barbecue last summer. Janet, Frank's youngest sister, the one with 3 kids and a husband who'd been laid off twice in the past 5 years. If Janet thought I was sitting on millions while she was struggling to keep her family afloat. Robert, here's what you're going to do. You're going to call every single person you told about my supposed wealth, and you're going to explain that you were misinformed. You're going to apologize for spreading false information about my financial situation. But if I do that, people will ask questions about Michael. Yes, they will. And Michael will have to answer them. Aunt Dorothy, please. This could destroy his reputation, his career. He's a teacher, for God's sake. If this gets out, maybe he should have thought about that before committing fraud and dragging the entire family into his lies. I hung up and immediately called Helen in Florida. Dorothy! Her voice was warm with genuine affection. How lovely to hear from you. How are you feeling, dear? I'm fine, Helen. But I need to ask you something. A few weeks ago, you called about a dental procedure. You seemed hesitant to ask for help. Why? Oh, that. She sounded embarrassed. Robert had mentioned something about you being very generous with family, but also very private about it. I didn't want to presume or make you uncomfortable. Helen, if I had millions of dollars, don't you think I'd have offered to help you with dental work without you having to ask? Well, yes. But Robert said rich people are often funny about money, that they don't like feeling taken advantage of. Helen, I'm not rich. I never have been. Robert was misinformed about my financial situation. Silence. Then quietly. Dorothy, are you saying you can't help with the dental work? Because if that's the case, please don't worry about it. I'll figure something out. My heart broke. Helen, of course I'll help with the dental work. I may not have millions, but I can certainly manage $300. I'll send you a check today. Are you sure? I don't want to impose. You're not imposing. You're family, and family helps family. Real help, not imaginary help. After I hung up with Helen, I sat in my small living room and thought about the web of lies Michael had created. He hadn't just committed fraud, he'd poisoned family relationships, made elderly relatives feel ashamed to ask for help, and created a false narrative that was affecting everyone in our family. Connor emerged from the bathroom, dressed for his day. "I called Princeton's financial aid office," he said. "I have an appointment tomorrow to discuss correcting my aid application." "Good for you. That's the right thing to do." "Grandma, there's something else. I've been thinking about that phone call Dad got yesterday." "The one about a meeting? What about it?" "He's supposed to meet someone today at 2 p.m. I heard him tell Mom this morning that he couldn't cancel it, that too much was riding on it." "Did he say where?" "Some restaurant downtown. Chez Laurent, I think." I knew Chez Laurent. Expensive French place where people went to impress clients or close important deals. Not the kind of place a high school teacher would meet friends for lunch. "Connor, how would you feel about taking your grandmother out for a late lunch today?" He grinned. "I think that sounds like an excellent idea." Chez Laurent at 1:45 p.m. was exactly what I expected. White tablecloths, pretentious waiters, and prices that would make a sensible person eat at home. Connor and I requested a table near the back, where we could see the entire restaurant without being obvious about it. "Are you sure about this, Grandma?" Connor asked, studying the menu with the horrified expression of someone discovering that soup costs $18. "Absolutely. Sometimes you have to pay premium prices for premium information." At exactly 2 p.m., Michael walked in. He was wearing his best suit, the one he'd bought for parent conferences, and he looked nervous enough to power a small city. He spoke to the hostess, who led him to a corner table. 5 minutes later, I understood why Connor had thought his father was getting into something complicated. The man who joined Michael was Richard Waverly, one of Westchester County's most prominent attorneys. I recognized him from newspaper photos, the kind of lawyer who defended wealthy people when they got caught doing things that would land ordinary folks in prison. "Connor," I whispered, "do you recognize that man with your father?" He squinted across the restaurant. "No, but Dad's definitely nervous. Look how he's fidgeting with his napkin." I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could read body language. Michael was doing most of the talking, gesturing anxiously, while Waverly listened with the patient expression of someone being paid very well for his time. Occasionally, Waverly would lean forward and say something that made Michael look even more uncomfortable. Then Waverly pulled out a thick manila envelope and slid it across the table. "Connor, I need you to take a picture of that envelope when they're not looking." "Grandma, that feels like spying." "Honey, feels like when your father is having secret meetings with expensive lawyers after committing fraud, it's not spying, it's self-preservation." Connor discreetly used his phone to capture several photos as Michael opened the envelope and reviewed what appeared to be legal documents. Whatever was in those papers made my son's face go pale. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes. Then something interesting happened. Waverly pulled out his own phone and made a call. He spoke briefly, nodded, and hung up. Whatever he'd been told seemed to satisfy him, because he shook Michael's hand and left. Michael remained at the table for another 10 minutes, staring at the documents like they contained his death warrant. Finally, he put them back in the envelope and left, without finishing his expensive lunch. "Well," I said to Connor as we watched Michael hurry past our table without seeing us, "that was illuminating. What do you think those documents were?" "I'm not sure, but I intend to find out." "Connor, how good are you with that computer of yours?" "Pretty good." "Why?" "Because Richard Waverly is a very specific type of lawyer. He specializes in white-collar criminal defense and wealthy families trying to avoid scandal. If your father is meeting with him, it means this situation is much worse than fraud on college applications." We paid our ridiculous check and drove back to my apartment. Connor immediately opened his laptop and pulled up the photos he'd taken. "The envelope has a law firm logo," he said, enlarging the image. "Waverly, Morrison and Associates. And look at this. There's a return address label. It's from something called Hartford Estate Management Services." "Connor, look up Hartford Estate Management. See what they do." His fingers flew over the keyboard. "Here we go. They're a company that manages trusts and estates for wealthy families. Says here they specialize in discreet wealth management for high net worth individuals seeking privacy in their financial affairs. Estate management, trust services, things that would be very useful if someone wanted to create convincing fake documentation about a non-existent trust fund." "Connor, I think your father may have been working with these people to create more sophisticated documents about my trust fund. But if that's true, the question is why he'd need Richard Waverly. Maybe because he got caught? Or maybe because the fake documents were used for something bigger than college financial aid." Connor was quiet for a moment, scrolling through the Hartford Estate Management website. "Grandma, look at this. They have a whole section about family wealth preservation strategies and asset protection planning. What if Dad wasn't just lying about your money? What if he was using the fake trust fund documents for something else? Like what? Like borrowing money. Think about it. If people believe you have millions in a trust fund, and Dad has documents that look official, he could use those as collateral for loans. My stomach dropped. Connor, that would be massive fraud. Not just lying on financial aid forms, but potentially millions of dollars in fraudulent loans, which would explain why he needs Richard Waverly. I picked up my phone and called Robert again. Aunt Dorothy? I was just about to call you back about those family notifications. Robert, I need you to think carefully. When Michael showed you those trust fund documents, did he mention anything about using them for financial planning, loans, investments, anything like that? Well, actually, yes. He said he was helping you manage some financial decisions, said you'd asked him to look into investment opportunities or debt consolidation options. He made it sound like you were considering some financial restructuring but wanted family input. Did he specifically mention borrowing money or taking out loans? He said something about you possibly taking a loan against the trust fund for tax purposes, said wealthy people often do that instead of liquidating assets. It sounded very sophisticated. Connor looked at me with wide eyes. He's been telling people you were planning to borrow money? More than that, I said to Robert. Robert, if Michael approached you about co-signing anything or providing professional references for financial arrangements, you'd remember that, right? Of course I would. Why? Just checking. Robert, I want you to call your bank and make sure no one has inquired about your accounts or asked for verification of your relationship to Dorothy Hartwell. Aunt Dorothy, you're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. And Robert, if anyone contacts you claiming to represent me or asking about my financial situation, you call me immediately. Don't provide any information to anyone, no matter how official they sound. After I hung up, Connor and I sat in my small living room, surrounded by the evidence of my modest life, contemplating just how deep Michael's deception might go. Grandma, Connor said quietly, what if this is bigger than we think? What if Dad has been using your name and fake trust fund documents to borrow serious money? Then your father isn't just facing fraud charges, honey. He's looking at identity theft, wire fraud, and potentially dozens of other federal crimes. What do we do? I looked at this earnest young man who'd been dragged into his parents' lies through no fault of his own, and I made a decision that would change everything. We're going to find out exactly what your father has done, and then we're going to make sure he faces the consequences. But first, I was going to find out who else knew about Dorothy Hartwell's imaginary millions. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called in a favor from someone who owed me one. Detective Maria Santos had been a rookie cop 20 years ago when she'd brought her diabetic daughter to the emergency room where I worked. The child was in crisis, and Maria was panicking, but I'd stayed with them through the entire ordeal, holding the little girl's hand while the doctors stabilized her. Over the years, Maria and I had kept in touch. She'd made detective, her daughter had grown up healthy, and I'd watched from a distance as Maria built a reputation as someone who didn't let things slide. Dorothy Hartwell! Maria's voice was warm when she answered. How are you? It's been too long. I'm well, Maria, but I need your help with something that might interest you professionally. What's going on? Identity theft, fraud, possibly more. Can we meet? 2 hours later, Maria sat in my living room with Connor and me, listening to the entire story. She'd brought a legal pad and was taking notes with the focused attention of someone who'd heard enough crime stories to know the real thing when she heard it. Show me everything, she said. Connor pulled up the fake bank statements, the photos from the restaurant, everything we'd discovered. Maria studied each document carefully, occasionally asking questions about dates and details. Dorothy, this is sophisticated, she said finally. These aren't amateur forgeries. Someone with serious technical skills created these documents. And if your son is meeting with Richard Waverly, he's definitely in deeper than college fraud. How much deeper? Let me make some calls. But first, I need you to do something for me. I want you to call your bank and get copies of every statement for the past 3 years. If someone's been using your identity for financial fraud, there might be traces in your real accounts. While I was on the phone with Westchester Community Bank, Connor was researching Hartford Estate Management more thoroughly. Grandma, he said as I hung up, look at this. Hartford Estate Management has been in the news. They're being investigated for helping clients create fake documentation for tax evasion and loan fraud. Maria looked up sharply. When was this investigation announced? 6 months ago. The FBI raided their offices in January. That explains the timeline, Maria said. If your father was working with them and they got raided, he'd suddenly be exposed. That's probably why he needs Waverly. Damage control. My phone rang. It was Michael. Mom, we need to talk. Can you come over? Actually, Michael, why don't you come here? I have some questions for you. I'd rather discuss this privately. Privacy is overrated, son. Come here or we don't talk at all. He arrived 30 minutes later, looking like he hadn't slept in days. When he saw Connor sitting with Maria and me, his face went white. Connor, what are you doing here? And who is this? This is Detective Santos, I said calmly. She's helping us understand the legal implications of identity theft and fraud. Michael stood frozen in my doorway. Mom, there's been a misunderstanding. Sit down, Michael. It's time for the truth. He remained standing. Connor, I think you should leave. This is between your grandmother and me. Actually, Maria said, standing up to her full height, Connor is a witness in a potential federal crime. He's not going anywhere. That did it. Michael collapsed into my armchair like a deflated balloon. How much trouble am I in? He asked quietly. That depends, Maria said, on how much you tell us right now. Michael looked at each of us, then put his head in his hands. It started small, just the college financial aid thing 2 years ago. But then Robert started talking about how impressed he was that Mom was helping us, and other people started asking questions. And I couldn't just admit I'd lied. So you made the lie bigger, I said. 6 months ago, Hartford Estate Management approached me. They said they could help create more professional documentation, make everything look more legitimate. They said wealthy families did this kind of thing all the time for privacy. What did you pay them for these services? Maria asked. $50,000. Connor gasped. Dad, where did you get $50,000? Michael's silence was answer enough. You borrowed it, I said, using the fake trust fund documents as collateral. I took out a home equity line of credit first, just for $30,000 to pay Hartford for the initial documentation. Then they said once the enhanced documents were in place, I could easily get a larger loan to pay back the home equity line and have money left over. How much larger? Maria asked. $500,000. The room went dead silent. $500,000 in fraudulent loans using my identity and fake documents. Michael, Maria said carefully, did you actually receive this money? $200,000 so far. The rest was supposed to come through this week, but then Hartford got raided and everything fell apart. Where is the $200,000? Gone. Most of it went to pay off our credit cards and the original home equity loan. Some went to Connor's tuition payments that weren't covered by aid. The rest, I invested it. You invested stolen money? Connor looked horrified. It wasn't stolen. I was going to pay it back as soon as Mom's trust fund was properly established. Michael, I said very quietly, there is no trust fund. There never was going to be a trust fund. How exactly were you planning to pay back money you borrowed against assets I don't have? He looked up at me with desperate eyes. I hoped maybe you'd agree to help, maybe co-sign for real loans. Once you understood how much good the money was doing for the family. Maria stood up. Mr. Hartwell, I need you to understand something. You've committed identity theft, wire fraud, bank fraud, and potentially money laundering. You're looking at decades in federal prison. But I never meant for anyone to get hurt. Your mother's credit has been damaged by fake accounts opened in her name. Your son committed federal fraud on financial aid applications. Your entire extended family has been manipulated into believing lies about your financial situation. How is that not hurting people? Michael started crying then. Not the quiet tears of remorse, but the ugly sobbing of someone whose entire world was collapsing. Connor, I said quietly, would you mind making some tea? I think we could all use some. As Connor headed to the kitchen, I moved to sit closer to my son. Michael, here's what's going to happen. You're going to work with Detective Santos to provide a complete confession. You're going to help the authorities recover whatever money can be recovered. And you're going to face the consequences of your choices. Mom, please. But here's what else is going to happen. Connor is going to finish college, honestly this time, with real financial aid based on accurate information. And when you get out of prison, whenever that is, you're going to rebuild your relationship with your son based on truth instead of lies. What about Patricia? What about our house? Patricia made her choices when she helped you create fake documents. As for the house, I looked around my small, honest apartment. Michael, I've learned something important this week. Home isn't about how much money you have or how impressive your address is. It's about living with integrity and being surrounded by people who love you for who you really are. Connor returned with tea for everyone. As Maria began explaining the legal process to Michael, I watched my grandson serve tea with the careful attention of someone who'd been raised with good manners despite his parents' moral failures. This boy was going to be fine, more than fine. He was going to be better than fine because he'd learned early that lies have consequences and integrity matters more than appearances. As for Michael, well, he'd have plenty of time to think about the choices that had brought him here. And me? For the first time in years, I felt genuinely wealthy. Not because I had money, but because I had something more valuable. The truth, a grandson who respected me, and the knowledge that I'd never again let anyone make me complicit in their deceptions. Sometimes the best inheritance you can leave someone isn't money in a trust fund. Sometimes it's just the courage to live honestly, no matter the cost. 3 months later, I got a letter from Connor at Princeton. He'd managed to secure legitimate financial aid after reporting the fraud, and he was thriving in his studies. He'd also started a support group for students dealing with family financial crimes. Apparently, he wasn't the only one whose parents had made poor choices. The letter ended with something that made me smile. "Grandma, I finally understand what real wealth looks like. It looks like you, strong, honest, and never backing down from the truth. Thanks for showing me that integrity is the only inheritance that actually matters." I folded the letter carefully and put it in the box where I kept my most precious possessions. Next to it was a photo Connor had sent, him in his dorm room, studying hard and looking genuinely happy. Outside my small apartment window, the leaves were changing colors. Another season, another chance to start fresh. And for the first time in decades, I was looking forward to what came next. If you're watching this, remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to live someone else's lie. And sometimes the greatest wealth is discovering that you're worth more than you ever imagined, even without a penny to your name. Subscribe if this story spoke to you, and let me know in the comments. Have you ever discovered family members lying about money? How did you handle it? Because trust me, the truth always comes out eventually. And when it does, you want to be standing on the right side of it. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.